So Terry, one of your big things in retirement is gliding. Is this something that many people could hope to do?
Well, yeah, I think so, Brian. In fact, I would say essentially if you can drive a car, you can probably be a glider or a soaring pilot. It is a very interesting and exhilarating sport. And perhaps I could just explain how I got involved in the whole situation, and also the process to flying, and also maybe an example of what I find so very interesting and exciting about the whole sport.
That'll be great. Okay, you go ahead.
Well, I guess there's a fair bit to cover, so I'll get right into it. First off, I did want to say, Brian, congratulations on your Just Ottawa website. I think
Thanks, Terry.
seemed very successful. I first started to have an interest in flying at a very early age. In fact, I remember playing with the kids in the neighborhood, and they were going to be cops and cowboys and so forth, and I always wanted to be a pilot. In fact, I guess that aspiration was rather reinforced by some of my teachers at the time, who felt I always had my head in the clouds in any event. And but I went from there to actually fulfill the dream in my teenage years. I did obtain a flying license, which was flying an airplane with an engine, and it was quite interesting because I recall being able to fly once I got to the airport, but I didn't have a driver's license, so that presented a bit of a challenge to get to the airport. Anyway, what I would like to do, as I say, is just explain the process with respect to flying, and in particular soaring, or being a glider pilot. I retired from the Foreign Service. My career went off in a different direction to aviation, and I retired from the Foreign Service a couple of years ago, and decided to, at that point, go back to flying. And I checked with a few of the flying clubs in the area, and someone mentioned to me, "Have you tried gliding or soaring?" And I said, well, that's like flying an airplane without an engine. And I said, I don't really think I want to do that. But in any event, my curiosity, I headed out and checked on the 3 clubs in the area. There's one in Cars, there's one in Hawkesbury, and there's one in Pendleton. They're all first-class clubs. And I ended up joining the club, the Gatineau Gliding Club, which is located in Pendleton. It's an old Air Force base. And from there I started the process of soaring, or gliding or flying. You can use the terms interchangeably, really. And how does one get up there? That's probably the first question you might want to ask. And well, essentially you get towed up there by a power plane. And there's a 200-foot cable, if you want, which is attached to the power plane, and you fly behind it. And you get towed up to your altitude. So if the pilot in the lead plane turns or banks to the right, then you want to do that also. Otherwise, it, as you can imagine, gets a little messy. And you usually do this up until about 2,000 or 3,000 feet, and then you drop off, and then you have what is known as free flight. And how do you stay up, though? Well, there's a phenomenon by the name of a thermal, which exists out there. It's in central Canada. You can get these that are upward currents of air. Essentially, they go to about 8,000 feet. So you get inside one of these, and then you corkscrew your way to the top. And then you either get bumped out by the thermal itself, or you can indeed fly out and fly around and try to find another thermal and get back up again. And how do you land, you might ask? Well, you land the same way as you would a regular airplane. You check in by radio to the airport, you do your base leg, and you do your final approach. Of course, there's one thing that's quite different with a glider or a sailplane, and that is when you're on your final approach, it is your final approach. It's you can't put the throttle forward and go around and do another circuit because you didn't like the way you're lined up or whatever. So that's really how you get up there and stay up there and how you land. Now there is also, of course, a process to getting licensed as a glider pilot, and most of you out there, I think, will be glad to hear that Transport Canada is all over this sport or this pastime, because it's a risk sport, and they want, and I think also all of the gliding clubs want to make it as risk-free as possible. So there are two parallel tracks if you want to become qualified. One is where you would do what they call the theory, and there's a mandatory ground school which lasts for 10 weeks. It's 3 hours a week, and this is followed by a test. And then there's a test which your club normally gives to you prior to flying solo. And then there's the big test which comes just before your licensing, and this is a Transport Canada test. And it's essentially the same examination that you would have for a regular power pilot, except there's a section in that exam on aircraft engines, which of course with a glider you don't need to worry about. The other parallel track that you need to follow is, of course, the actual practical flying part. And you start off your flying with an instructor, and you go from there to the point where you fly solo or alone. And that's a big day, needless to say. And then after that solo benchmark, then you actually fly with an instructor and on your own, and you enhance your skills until you get to the point where you're ready for your license check flight. And that, after you've done that, then you successfully have passed all the requirements, and you have your pilot's license or your glider pilot's license. And but really, this is a license to learn, because after you've obtained that, then you go on to perhaps flying cross country. You can do an aerobatics course. You can become an instructor and teach other students. Or what I've been doing for the last year and a bit is I've been taking up some passengers and really flying in the area. So there are lots of opportunities. The way I think that you would get more information on this sport is to punch in on your magic Google machine the coordinates Gatineau Gliding Club, and up will come the map of how to get there, the points of contact, the rates, etc., etc. So I think there's a wealth of information there. And perhaps in closing, I could give you an example of my personal kind of exhilaration that one feels when gliding. And this was just a few weeks ago, actually. And I was flying south of the Ottawa River, and I was in a thermal, and I was working my way up, and it was really quiet and peaceful, and the only noise, of course, is the wind rushing over the wings. And I could look out to the west, and I would see Ottawa. I could see Montreal to the east. There was Mont Tremblant to the north, and way down to the south across the St. Lawrence River was the state of New York and the Adirondack Mountains. And I thought, this was so beautiful. And then in the circuit with me, or also soaring, was a hawk. And we kind of played together for a while. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and or she, whatever it was. And then it took off. But that was a kind of a blending with nature, and it was really an exciting and memorable time. But there are lots of situations like that in the sport of gliding. So I guess it's really a three-dimensional form of freedom, which probably is unequaled in most sports or pastimes. So if you're at all interested, I'd look forward to flying with you and talking with you or whatever, and I know the gliding club would be delighted to hear from you. So, safe flying.